The federal government tabled its spring economic update today. The headline: the deficit came in at $66.9 billion, $11 billion better than projected. Finance Minister Champagne called it proof of responsible fiscal management. Ho Nelly, we read the 167 pages, and what we found is a government running the largest sustained peacetime deficits in Canadian history. And they're using an accounting trick designed to make sure you don't notice. Today, the numbers, the sleight of hand, and what it means for your dollar, your mortgage, and your portfolio. 3 things Ottawa wants you to focus on. The deficit is improving, major new programs are coming, and the operating budget will be balanced by 2028-29. Here's what they'd prefer you skip. The total deficit never disappears, not in 2028, not in 2031. Canada runs deficits over $50 billion every year as far as the projection goes. And the annual interest bill on all that debt is already larger than what we send provinces for healthcare. 3 segments today: the accounting trick, the spending, and what it actually does to Canadian markets. Here's the trick. The government has split the deficit in 2, an operating portion and a capital portion. They've promised to balance the operating side by 2028-29. Sounds responsible. The problem is they also get to decide what counts as capital. Defense spending, infrastructure, housing programs, the new Skilled Trades Initiative, the $25 billion Sovereign Wealth Fund, all capital. And as that column grows, the operating line shrinks, not because spending is falling, but because the accounting is shifted. The document actually says it plainly. By 2028-29, the deficit will entirely support capital investments. Read that again. They're not saying the deficit disappears. They're saying all of it gets classified as capital. The total deficit this year is still around $60 billion. And here's the kicker. This windfall that let them beat their own projection? Yeah, surging oil prices from the Middle East conflict drove a revenue surge nobody budgeted for. One economist called it a revenue pop. When that pop arrived, the government had a choice: pay down debt or spend it. They spent it. So where does the $37.5 billion in new measures go? The centerpiece is Team Canada Strong, $6 billion over 5 years to recruit and train up to 100,000 new skilled trades workers. The problem is real. The government's own documents say Canada faces a persistent gap of more than 20,000 trade workers per year. The program is credible. Execution is the open question. Then there's the Canada Strong Fund, Canada's first sovereign wealth fund. $25 billion in seed money to invest in strategic Canadian projects, with the retail products so ordinary Canadians can participate in returns. Politically compelling, but the update doesn't say where the $25 billion comes from. That matters. Norway built its sovereign wealth fund on realized oil revenues. If Canada borrows to fund this, it's not a wealth fund, it's a leveraged investment vehicle. That's a fundamentally different risk. One detail that tells you everything about this document's priorities: the word oil appears 130 times. Defense appears 85 times. Public service, as in the size and cost of the federal bureaucracy, just 7 times. The government is not here to talk about Ottawa's own spending. They're here to talk about building things. Whether those are the same conversation is a question worth asking. So let's talk about the number that never makes the headline: public debt charges. Canada paid $53.3 billion in interest last fiscal year. Not principal, just interest. The minimum monthly payment. The carrying cost of everything you've borrowed. That number is already larger than the entire Canada Health transfer to the provinces. It's larger than the Canada Child Benefit. And here's where it gets serious. The government's own budget 2025 projections show debt charges climbing to $76 billion by 2029-2030. By 2030-31, Canada's national tax policy leader puts that number at $81 billion. Their document, their numbers. Put that against the revenue side. Total federal tax revenues are approximately $508 billion. That means within a decade, we could be sending more than $1 in 5 of everything the federal government collects. Every income tax return, every GST payment, every corporate tax dollar, straight to bankers as interest. In the early 1990s, debt servicing consumed roughly a third of federal revenues before spending was cut hard to bring it under control. The Montreal Economic Institute warned recently that without adjustments, we will approach that territory again. We are not there yet, but the direction is clear, and today's update adds to the trajectory rather than bending it down. The former parliamentary budget officer said it plainly when this started: the government is losing fiscal space. When people say, I want to do this and I want to do that, the government just doesn't have the fiscal room. it's getting eaten up by the credit card bills. That was 2023. The bill is even larger now. And here's where it lands on your street. The Bank of Canada holds its policy rate at 2.25%, and tomorrow is the next rate decision. But the Bank of Canada rate and your fixed mortgage rate are not the same thing. Fixed rates are priced off long-term Government of Canada bond yields, and those yields have stayed elevated even as the policy rate came down. Why? Because bond markets are pricing in exactly this fiscal trajectory. The Bank of Canada's own research last month confirmed it. The term premium, the extra return investors demand to hold long-dated government debt, is at its highest level in over a decade. When markets see persistent deficits with no path to balance and growing supply of government bonds, they demand more yield. The Bank of Canada can cut, but your fixed rate can still go up. On the Canadian dollar, oil is supporting the loonie right now, and that's real. But structurally, chronic deficits and a compressed Canada-US rate differential put a ceiling on how far the CAD can run. If the CUSMA renegotiation later this year goes sideways, Canadian assets could reprice extremely fast. 3 things to hold on to. Long bonds carry more risk than they're being priced for. Term premiums are elevated and government issuance is going up, not down. The CAD has oil support today but limited structural upside tomorrow. And the debt servicing trajectory is the slow-moving crisis in this document. Every new dollar of deficit is another dollar that compounds that interest bill and crowds out the spending Canadians actually voted for. Here's the honest verdict. The challenges this government is responding to are real. Housing, defense, sovereignty, trade diversification. These are legitimate priorities. The problem isn't the ambition, it's the financing. The plan is borrow indefinitely, call it capital, point to a net debt to GDP ratio that looks against the G7 average and call it discipline. That 10.2% net debt number deserves scrutiny. It looks the way it does because Canada nets out the CPP and QPP pension fund assets roughly $700 billion against its liabilities. No other G7 country accounts for their public pension assets the same way, so the comparison is not apples to apples. Using the IMF's gross debt figure, the same methodology every other country reports on, and Canada comes in at over 100% of GDP. The cushion is real, but it's considerably thinner than the government's preferred number suggests, and this update used a revenue windfall to spend more, not save more. The Parliamentary Budget Office has already put a number on it, a 7.5% chance the government meets its own deficit to GDP targets. Well, that's your daily brief for today. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's brief, and don't be afraid to comment if there's a topic you think deserves a highlight here. I'm Steve, as always. Nothing here is financial advice. Everyone's situation is different, so please do your own research and talk to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decisions. Good night.